Hello everybody and welcome to my review of the Turtle Beach VelocityOne sim racing wheel. I, like you, was pretty surprised to hear that Turtle Beach was coming out with a sim racing wheel, and so I was actually eager to get my hands on it, and luckily Turtle Beach actually reached out to me and sent me a wheel for review, so thank you guys very much. I would not have been able to review this wheel had you guys not sent me a wheel. It's very much appreciated. So, let's get into it. First and foremost, we're going to go over the wheel itself. Now, as you'd expect, we've got paddle shifters on the back, but you might notice these other two paddles. These are analog paddles, which of course you can use as a handbrake if you're doing something like rally or rally cross. If you're doing any actual real drifting where the wheel's going to be spinning around a lot, you know it's going to be nearly impossible to try to find it as it's spinning, so it's not going to quite work out. However, there is a solution built into this wheel package, which I think is pretty cool, one of the coolest features, but we'll get into that later. On the other side, it could definitely be used as a hand clutch, so that is pretty cool for an entry-level wheel. When it comes to the quick release, it's actually pretty nice. I got no complaints. It feels good, it's really solid, and it even looks pretty cool when it is not connected. I have no complaints for that whatsoever. And it also kind of suggests that maybe it will be, you know, in the packaging, it talks about it being a modular system. There's nothing else really out yet, but that and one other clue on the wheelbase suggests that they are planning more peripherals and or add-ons to this. So it's kind of exciting to think about what might be planned in the future. On the front, you'll notice that there are probably some buttons that are familiar to you if you are an Xbox user, because this wheel does have the Xbox in mind. Unfortunately, there is no PlayStation support, so I could not use this with Gran Turismo 7, which is my main game. I did spend a lot of time on iRacing and Assetto Corsa doing some drifting, but of course we'll get into that later. Down here, this controls the race management display and the UI that's built into the wheelbase itself. It's pretty slick, but of course you can't really map it to anything else if that's what it's for. Over here we've got an actual dial and a D-pad type stick, and I did use that for the black box functions on iRacing. I really liked that. 6 buttons up here, and these are kind of fake dials. I guess they're not necessarily fake. They do the work, but they're not actual dials. They're just up and down, forward and back. Nothing really wrong with that. In fact, I think that's probably preferable to extra dials because it does make it a little bit easier. You can just push it forward or back with your thumb, and yeah, it's pretty nice. I don't have any complaints about the shape of the wheel either. It is a D-shaped wheel, but when it came to drifting, it didn't really get in the way whatsoever. A lot of people are probably going to want some kind of formula style wheel, so like I mentioned before, hopefully they're going to be giving us more options for that kind of thing. When it comes to the pedals, initially I was very impressed, but the more I thought about it, the less impressed I became. The first thing that really comes to mind is the fact that it is metal pedals and they're mounted on a plastic package. And that's the kind of thing that is not really the best option when it comes to longevity for a product. But with that said, I don't know if it's ever going to actually be an issue, but it just seems like the kind of thing where the plastic would definitely give out more than metal or before the metal, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see. When it comes to the throttle and the clutch, you can adjust it. You can adjust the preload. I already thought that the throttle feels really good. It feels better than my 2-pedal Fanatec system that I use right now, but what was really strange to me is there is no physical adjustment that you can do to the brake. There's a software adjustment. You can make it incredibly light, pretty light, and then pretty normal, but as an entry-level wheel package, I think that's pretty cool. It kind of seems like they want you to be able to just use it as a light load cell or just make it feel kind of like a potentiometer kind of brake. But either way, the fact that it is an entry-level pedal system and it has the load cell is kind of cool. Now you can adjust the brake left and right. As you can see, there's a ton of space here in case you want to get it closer to your throttle. I think they probably had a lot of road driving in mind. Some heel toe shifting, some rev matching. But if you want to avoid that, you can also move it even closer to the clutch. But yeah, it's cool that it is adjustable left and right. Strange that it is not adjustable when it comes to the resistance physically. Where you rest your heel, just fine. I had no issues. I think most people at this point probably use socks or shoes. I didn't try it without my socks because that doesn't feel nice. If you're doing that, use socks, and then you won't have any issue whatsoever. It was really comfortable. No issues there. Like most pedals, there's no actual dead pedal, but I think anyone who's used to sim racing is kind of used to that. So in reality, it's not really an issue at all. I have owned 7 different wheelbases in the 12 or 13 years that I've been sim racing, and this is by far the largest one that I have ever seen. Now, that's not a real problem, unless you're the kind of person who takes it off their desk after using it, but in that case, it's kind of annoying to do that anyway, so I don't think the extra few pounds is really going to make that much of a difference. So all in all, the heftiness of this thing doesn't really matter. It's kind of cool, kind of imposing, and it looks nice. One of the reasons I think that it is extra heavy, of course, is the display. Now, you can use a race management display, so you get all of your information right here instead of putting it on the screen, which can be a lot of fun for someone who likes to have a really clean screen. Now, the only issue with that is I actually couldn't get it to work. Now, I only played iRacing and AC, and it just didn't seem to have the support yet. Now, I have seen people playing what looked like iRacing in a couple videos, but I don't know how they did that, and with a little bit of searching, I didn't find a solution either. However, I didn't look that hard. It didn't really make that much of a difference to me because I usually have the information on the screen anyways and didn't even think to look down. But for immersion, or for anyone who really wants to do that, certainly you'll be able to figure that out. And if they don't have support now, that is luckily the kind of thing that they could fix with some firmware or software updates. So I don't think it's a big issue that I wasn't able to get it to work just yet. You can also go through all the different options for the wheel. There is really cool lighting effects behind all the buttons, which you can also just turn all the way off. Or what I like to do is I had one color for the profile that I use for iRacing and another color that I used for the profile for Assetto Corsa. This little dial right here, if you don't change the button mapping, just switches between profiles. So when I wanted to switch profiles, when I switched games, I just turned it one to the right, and suddenly I knew because of the light that it displayed on all of the buttons that I was on the right profile to then start playing Assetto Corsa. I thought that was a really cool function. Now, speaking of all of these buttons on the button box, these two right here, on and off. Now, I didn't have to do this. I imagine you can, because you can change the button mapping of pretty much every button on this. If you somehow bump this on accident, you will turn off your wheel. That is something you should probably turn off if you end up bumping it, but I didn't bump it whatsoever. It never became an issue, and I use the buttons a lot. I'll talk about why I use these 4 buttons a lot when it comes to the drifting section of this video, but yeah, I didn't have an issue with it whatsoever. This is really cool for role-playing too. I assigned that to my ignition in iRacing. It's fun. These other 2 dials, of course, they work as dials, and then, really interesting part, they're 3-way toggles: up, neutral, down. Now, I think that's cool, and I think that whoever was behind this probably did a lot of market research and realized that button boxes are not something that really come with wheels, and it is something that a lot of people really want to use when it comes to more hardcore sim racing. However, I asked a lot of people, and there were not a lot of reasons why you would ever need a 3-way toggle. Now, if you know, let me know, because first and foremost, it's not an issue. It's an extra option. I actually use this one to teleport to the pits in Assetto. Then I just moved it to neutral. But I guess someone mentioned that it might be low wiper, high wiper, off. But besides that, I don't do a lot of racing the hybrid, so maybe there's something to do with energy harvesting that you'd want to change, but I don't know. It's kind of a cool option, and we like toggle switches, but it kind of seems like overkill, and it seems like you could just use some buttons or more dials rather than that. Another option, or another reason that this thing is so heavy, assuming, is this cool panel that hides the tool that you use to mount and dismount the button box, which can go on either side, which I think is awesome. Or the built-in desk mounts. There's a nice bolt hidden in here, and you just unscrew it, screw it to mount it and unmount it. I think is really cool. I don't know if I've ever seen a wheel that has such a slick function for mounting it to the desk versus just mounting it normal. I had no issue mounting it to my R seat, and when this goes all the way back in, it's completely flush with the bottom of the wheelbase, and I mounted it in the exact same holes that I use to mount my DD Pro. So if you have a DD Pro and you're wondering if this works, the same holes work. All in all, big old hefty wheel. I like it.
So the display is pretty cool. Naturally, it just shows your inputs. But when you go to the actual menu, you can choose platform. Obviously we're on PC right now. Different profiles which are saved. And what's cool is when you change profile, if you've got a different lighting theme, then you'll know exactly what profile you're on. Number 2 is for Assetto Corsa. I can change the lighting. We can do different effects. It can be static, breathing, or the color cycle. I like just keeping it static. It gets pretty distracting. You can also just turn it way down if you'd like to. App link, system, a bunch of deep system things here. We'll go in there real quick. Firmware, calibration, screen brightness, screen timeout, wheel pairing. A lot of different options. Headset mixer, because you can plug the headset directly into this thing in here. Then you can adjust your paddle mapping and dead zone because it does have analog paddles. Same with your pedals, everything about the wheel rotation and dead zone. Mapping all of your different buttons, and it's really cool. It actually shows a graphic of what each one is, so you don't have to guess. It's a really cool thing. The RMD, the telemetry, is cool. I haven't been able to get it to work for Assetto or iRacing. I imagine it works for Forza, maybe, but it probably will work for both. I imagine they'll update it for both. All of the different actual drive settings, the overall tuning, strength, center spring, and damping. And yeah, that's about it.
Before I even set up the Turtle Beach wheel, I wanted to jump in using the wheel that I use every day and see what I could do in iRacing and Assetto, because I don't actually play either of them very often at all. I probably play iRacing maybe twice a year and Assetto maybe even less than that. I used to play both of them way more often, but recently I've just been focusing on GT7. Not only did I want to get used to what both of the sims should feel like on a wheel that I love and trust, but I also wanted to kind of set a benchmark for both the times I could hit in iRacing as well as what I could accomplish with drifting in Assetto Corsa. On top of that, I had never actually driven this course even a single time, so I really had to learn the track. I didn't think it was fair to test out a wheel on a track that I didn't know, on a car I was uncomfortable with, on a sim I was uncomfortable with, so I spent a couple hours playing iRacing and about a half hour playing Assetto Corsa. About 2 hours in, I was able to get an optimal of 137 on this track, and the best lap that I'd hit was a 38.3. Before I actually shut this off, I got down to a 138.2, and I didn't get any better than that, but I was consistently in the low to mid 38s before I shut it off on my DD Pro. After spending a few hours just testing by myself, I decided to start recording because, to be quite honest, I was actually really impressed. I felt that there were a few things that needed to be improved, but I also realized that I hadn't really messed with the settings much either in the game itself or with the wheel itself. As you can see from my optimal and my best time, I wasn't that far off where I was with my DD Pro. But of course, those were just one-off laps, and I was definitely still off from my pace before. The overall strength of the feedback, just the feeling that it gives, felt really nice. The brakes were pretty soft, but I had pretty good control, and I actually really liked the way that the throttle felt. Despite an overall pretty good first impression, there were a couple things that I felt needed to be changed, and I thought that I was going to be able to change those by either changing the settings within iRacing or maybe with the wheel itself, because there are a few options when it comes to changing the force feedback. The first issue that I felt had to do with how I entered a corner and steering mid-corner. When I was turning in, if I wasn't going way beyond the slip angle, if I wasn't understeering, and if I wasn't really pushing the limits of the tires, I actually couldn't feel anything. It felt like I wasn't even in contact with the ground any longer. I assumed turning up just some of the settings would fix that, but a bigger problem, which you might actually be able to see as I'm negotiating these corners, is there seem to be sudden moments where the wheel's trying to tell me something, whether it's the weight shifting or just that I am pushing around a corner, and it's sending really sudden, sharp feedback through the wheel. Unfortunately, it didn't actually always correlate with when the weight was shifting or I was gaining or losing grip. It seemed to be completely random mid-corner. When you see what looks like little adjustments around the corners that I just took, was actually the wheel sending random feedback. The next day, I was able to spend a lot of time testing, and I was able to change some settings and make a little bit of improvements, but I still couldn't quite fix it. I did, however, have a fantastic time drifting in Assetto. So I've spent the past couple days on iRacing, and while initially fairly impressed, I wasn't overwhelmingly so, and it's because of one very specific thing that happens, especially when it comes to turn-in. And I was able to tune that out a little bit with the wheel settings as well as the in-game settings. But after only about a half hour of messing with the settings in Assetto Corsa, it feels incredible. I'm actually blown away by how it feels. It's very impressive, and it didn't take me long to get there. It actually feels better than my DD Pro feels, and that actually makes me think I need to go back and change the settings that I have for Assetto Corsa on my DD Pro, because I love that wheel. It's a fantastic wheel. But I'm just blown away. Now, if you're playing Forza, you probably don't have the opportunity to use like a separate shifter and e-brake. If you're on Assetto Corsa on PC, obviously you can just take one and plug it directly into your PC. You probably already have something like that if this is your platform of choice. But if you don't, if you're just trying to get a brand new wheel that has a load cell brake, a clutch, and all of the stuff that you would want from a sim racing wheel, with it all coming in a DD package, the button box is something really special, and it's not common when it comes to most of the wheels that you find out there. I was able to map upshift and downshift to the button box as well as a handbrake. So the biggest thing when it comes to trying to drift with paddles or using the e-brake on the wheel itself is trying to catch all that while your wheel's spinning. It's not impossible, but it's nearly impossible. But you completely take that out of the equation when you have the separate controller for it. Back in Forza 4, actually probably not Forza 4, back in Gran Turismo 5 and other titles, I would have a separate controller setup, or back before I had an e-brake or a shifter, I would just use my keyboard. As long as it's something separate from the wheel, it doesn't become an issue. But the force feedback with this, I am blown away. It's actually incredibly intuitive, and it legitimately feels better than my DD Pro. I am pretty rusty when it comes to drifting, but this actually gave me a lot of confidence back, and I can't stop saying it, I am genuinely impressed by this wheel, especially when it comes to drifting. I haven't tried any normal driving yet in AC, but I rarely ever do any actual racing in AC. It's almost just, I use it almost exclusively for drifting. I used to compete in Hoge competitions, but it's been a long time. I don't know if I'll go back to racing in Assetto, but I know that this is still my platform of choice when it comes to drifting. And as you can see, it's not an issue to reach across and use the button box to shift. I'm pretty quickly able to find the button that I need, and I've only, like I said, I've only been doing this for maybe a half hour. Any kind of issues that you may see with my technique are, of course, technique. I obviously should have connected all of those. But the wheel itself is not the issue. It's a fantastic experience. I am blown away by how this is working. I'm a little embarrassed by my drifting technique, but I'm absolutely blown away by the wheel. I can't believe how good it feels. Not the wall, of course. That didn't feel good. But I am genuinely impressed by the force feedback of this wheel and the overall performance when it comes to drifting in Assetto. With a boost of confidence in how good it felt playing Assetto Corsa, I decided to spend the rest of the next day once again racing on stream and then trying to adjust the settings and see if I can figure out what I can do to make it feel better so I could really use it for iRacing. Unfortunately, absolutely nothing I could do could cure all the issues. If I turned everything way down that I didn't feel the sudden jerkiness and the really rough inputs of what was essentially a mystery force feedback, but then I couldn't feel the wheel whatsoever when I was turning in and I had any kind of neutral steer. I was hoping, especially because there's a specific setting for the minimum force feedback in iRacing, that I could just turn that up and everything else down, and it would separate the really rough and sudden feelings that I was feeling through the wheel. But unfortunately, it didn't work. It didn't quite separate them at all. So no matter how low the force feedback was, I was always feeling that mid-corner, and randomly was the worst part. It really still didn't feel like it correlated with absolutely anything at all. After spending more than, I'd say, 15 total hours trying to figure out the settings, I decided I had to give up, unfortunately, trying to get it to work on iRacing. There's nothing I can do to either make it so I was just as fast or even just make it comfortable. This also gave me one final idea. I wanted to try racing in Assetto. It felt so good while drifting in Assetto, I assumed that it would feel just as good doing some actual driving, and at the very least I could recommend this wheel for normal racing in Assetto. On iRacing, I came to the conclusion after changing literally every single combination I could think of in-game settings versus wheel settings that I could not quite fix the strange feeling that I was getting with the force feedback kind of being so intrusive that it moved the wheel, and also on top of that, just having it be so sudden and not always in correlation with something was happening. So I decided after doing a lot of drifting, which felt fantastic, it felt really amazing, that I would go back and try to just drive in Assetto, and unfortunately the exact same issue is present. So I'm not sure if it's just trying to give me the feel of the wheel, but even when I'm just consistently holding an angle, as you might be able to see there, the wheel's jumping back and forth. And it does, at least in Assetto, feel like it is trying to give me feedback on the weight moving a little bit or the friction of the tires, but it's incredibly difficult to get it to be smooth, on top of the fact that it's not matching what it should for the strength of the other feelings. Like, for instance, if we're on a DD Pro and we feel a little bit of resistance in a corner and we go over a bump, or if the weight shifts, we can feel that, but it's never so much that it completely overpowers everything. Now, this is telling me to reduce the FFB gain, and I actually had reduced it multiple times as well and was not able to get it to change whatsoever. So we're going to change that one more time and we'll test it again. We had it at 60. I had initially turned it down to, I think, 80 and then 70 and turned it all the way down to 60. And this is when we were doing drifting, and then I didn't get that message again, and it also didn't feel weird or anything like that. So we had it here at 60. So I'm going to actually turn it down, I don't know, 10%. And we'll go back and do the same test. The other issue with that is there's no actual gain setting in iRacing. I turned the intensity way down, I turned it way up. Both with it down and up, I ended up turning the in-wheel strength up and down, every combination I could think of, and the same feeling persisted every single time. Unfortunately, I was able to cure the one issue I had where I felt absolutely nothing mid-corner turn-in, but the big intrusive force feedback bumps seem to be present everywhere. And the hardest thing about that is it's such a beautiful feeling besides that. So yeah, that definitely seems to be part of the issue, the gain. But the same feeling of it not necessarily correlating with everything, and also being extremely sudden, not smooth at all, is still an issue with that. And as someone who spent a lot of time, I drive in sim racing every single day, and it makes me second guess my instincts, unfortunately. Because when I feel something with any of the other wheels that I've used, then I can usually tell exactly what it's trying to tell me. And I know when I'm making a mistake and not. But I can't tell when I'm making a genuine mistake or if it's just trying to tell me that there's a little bit of resistance here. I can tell you this does feel better though, but it is still, I don't know if you can see the little, as I was saying that, as I was saying that, was jumping back and forth in my hand. At least I was able to save my car. We're going to stay on track right now. Now that we have the gain way down, we're going to turn it up. This is essentially what I did in iRacing. I turned the in-game settings way down, and we're turning them way up on the wheel. Not necessarily way up right now, actually it's 75%. The other thing is, it happens sometimes when I'm trying to change direction. As as I change direction, it's obviously a very precise thing that needs to happen. And when I'm feeling the bump go left as I'm trying to turn the car left, it will sometimes just obviously send my wheel deeper than I need to turn it, which doesn't allow me to be precise. I could feel the weight of the car go down right there. This is the saddest part. It's very clear that the wheel is actually very good. It's just this one thing now. This one tiny thing, I guess it's not tiny, but this one thing seems to be holding it back to greatness. And if that can be fixed, this wheel will be incredible. But as it stands, it's tough to use if I'm doing anything except drifting. Luckily, I do love drifting. In conclusion, the hardware itself is amazing, and deep down, I feel like just a firmware update or a software update could actually fix things. If they can fix the weird issues that I was having with the force feedback, then I feel like this wheel could be amazing. When it's not giving me the glitches, when it's not feeling really strange, when I'm drifting, for instance, it's actually one of the most enjoyable sim racing wheels I've ever used, but unfortunately that really limits me to playing Assetto Corsa and drifting. There's a lot more I want to do with that. I think if this is your first wheel, I think as an entry-level wheel, if you're going to be using this both for Xbox and for PC stuff, and you don't have a lot of experience with a more high-end wheel, then it might be an enjoyable experience. If you want a lot of the bells and whistles of the higher end stuff, and you just enjoy sim racing and you're not really trying to compete or be really hardcore about it, then this wheel might be for you. I think the one word that I could use to best describe how I feel about this wheel is potential. With all of the features, the core force feedback, the hardware, the little details, it's something that I almost love. I wanted to give this a glowing review because there are so many good ideas, so many well-executed parts to this package, but the fact that I can't use it for the main thing that I do and what I imagine would be the main thing most people would want to use it for nullifies everything else. I am excited for the future of this wheel, however. I do think it's potentially a firmware update away from greatness. If the odd, super intense force feedback issues are fixed, then this wheel will be an incredible deal. Unfortunately, until that day, I can really only recommend it for drifting on AC, and I don't think that alone is the best reason to buy it. If you want a really nice wheel that feels good and has some fantastic bits and design concepts, but don't care too much about your pace or being competitive, then this wheel might be for you. Thank you again to Turtle Beach for giving me this opportunity. I'm going to be following the development of this wheel and any updates with great interest. To finish this video, you can see me doing what I absolutely love, drifting a big old bus on an old Gran Turismo track, and I'm going to leave you with a little bit of footage of what that looks like from the outside because, again, I cannot stress how good drifting in AC is with this, but I just wish I could say the same about racing with it.
Bye.